I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby here with Anastasia Masaro, the production designer of Fellow Travelers. And Anastasia, when I imagine you look at a project like this and you see you're covering different time periods in a very specific community, is that a daunting challenge or is that an exciting challenge?
That's exciting. That means there's something for me to do. Because whenever I read a script, I'm always like, okay, what do I get to do here?
So, what was the first thing that you were like? Was there a particular scene or a particular setting that you were like, I can't wait to get my hands on that?
No, I mean, honestly, I loved the pilot. And I really wanted to work with Ron and Dan. So it was three things combined. The script was great, the story was great and timely. Ron is great. Dan, I had wanted to work with before. So yeah.
Well, and so I want to just talk about some of those locations because they are so specific and of a time period, and yet they feel so alive and modern at the same time. And I think just the first place to start would be like, the cozy corner, the bar. I mean, I watched those scenes and I was like, oh my God, it's like it's so specific. So talk about coming up with that location.
Um, that we knew we were going to build it because we were going to be spending a lot of time in it. There were a lot of scenes written for it. There were a lot of specific scenes of entries and exits. So it had to have a certain dynamic to work with those scenes. And then I didn't know how many others would be in there. So it existed. It was one of many clubs that existed at the time. And I love doing research. It's one of my favorite parts of the job, besides creating things from scratch. And I had found a description for it. I'd found the location. It was no longer, there was nothing, it was no longer there. There was nothing there. It had been above a shop. And the description for it was that it looked like it was going to burn down any day. And then one day it did. So it wasn't exactly, aspirational. I wanted the club to be someplace where Tim walks in and is like, wow, like, wow, he's never seen anything like it, didn't know that places like this existed, didn't know that such a vibrant community existed. That's what I wanted to get out of it. And then I had the idea of it being a place that had been taken over, which made sense for the time. So the idea became that it was, an old like vaudeville theater that got taken over. Because I also wanted it to be good looking. Come on, like we're spending a lot of time in there. You want to look at it and you want to see, a beautiful space. So, and it also needed to, because it was like lower, it was basement level. We were going to be lighting it for the DP. So there was going to be, hard ceiling. I wanted the ceiling to be kind of low feeling. And, we did a really thick plaster, like shiny oil paint on it so that it reflected all the light that we could put in there.
Well, and the effect for me, at least, as I was watching it, was almost like, yeah, it is its own world, but it also has to feel kind of insulated, and there's almost like a claustrophobic feel, like this is our place, but it's also always in danger of
Right.
being taken from us.
Right. That's why there's the light, there's the signal, there's the way to exit next to the jukebox. Thinking about how they could, like, what happens when they get raided, like what could happen, where would they go? Because they're in a basement.
Well, and along with that, the look of it corresponds so well with the costumes of the time period. I'm curious, what's the discussion between how closely do you and the costume designer work together in terms of having this nice uniform look?
Joseph and I were constantly in each other's offices. We're like constantly. We shared our Dropbox right from the very beginning. We talked colors, even when we pitched colors. We talked about it together first about like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this going, what if we do this for Hawk? What kind of colors are you thinking for Hawk? So it was, the Cozy Corner one wasn't all that difficult. Like getting down to actually Senate state was actually had more conversation, because there's only so many colors of suits, right? So it had to be, okay, Joseph, where do you want to go? What are your options? And so that I can come up with some other options. Or for example, the party, I think that's in episode 2, Senator Smith's birthday party. That was like basically, Ron described it as walking into a Picasso exhibit or something, like just a Picasso painting. Like that had a lot of, because I had put a lot of color in there with the carpet and the wallpaper. So that was a lot of discussion with Joseph about, okay, what are you doing? Like what kind of fabrics do you want to use? Because those can't be clashing and turning into, like melting into the wallpaper or just completely clashing. Cozy Corner was easier because it's dark, right? It's moody. We've got like shadows and play of light, and the DP can help. So that one was a little bit easier than bright lights.
You talked briefly about like, Hawk's atmosphere and his environment. And I found so often throughout the series, because it does cover so much time, that it also reflects kind of where the characters are and who they are emotionally at that given point, which is a real challenge considering of the span of time that you have to cover.
Yeah.
How did you, from a production design standpoint, track the characters' changes over the course of the series?
It was a lot to do with the locations, because we shot the whole thing pretty much in Toronto, some of it in Richmond, Virginia, but we're doing all these locations in Toronto. So like San Francisco, in Toronto. And where I always start with that is the sunlight's different everywhere, right? And so the color palette is also going to be different everywhere. And the other thing I also consider is, again, how do we want this set to feel? Because using like color is a very good and easy way to manipulate people's emotions. So I always rely on color to do that for me as well. Like what we want the characters to like what we want to help the characters convey. So for example, with Hawk, very closed person, hard to read. That's reflected in his apartment, but also in the colors. He's cool, but it's there's a warmth to that coolness. It's not hard cold. So with Tim, mushy gushy emotional guy, especially in his San Francisco apartment, that had a lot of colors, also reminiscent of that 80s period in San Francisco. Again, shot in Toronto. Same sunlight. So the colors are going to be, I'm going to use the colors in order to like try to manipulate the emotion there. Same with Mary's apartment, right? That was complete. There were not a lot of female spaces in this miniseries. So that was, how do we differentiate Mary's space so that it still works with all the other sets, but it's got a definite feminine vibe and not just with the wallpaper. So yeah, it becomes like the accessories, the colors, the curtains, big thing. Men, women do very different types of curtains. Somebody commented on like Tim's apartment in Washington. That didn't belong to him. I didn't want it to look like it belonged to him. He was just renting a room. So when you look at it, you're like, who the heck, where did this come from? It's the landlady stuff. It's all her stuff, except for his little specific things, the Mary over the bed, his books, his letters, his memories that he can easily bring along with him. Also, like different colors in Washington, less color.
Yeah, completely devoid of color in a lot of things. I'm thinking particularly like in some of the Senate backroom scenes with Roy Cohn. I'm just like, oh boy, this is chilly.
Yeah, the Senate, not a colorful place. I mean, the most colorful thing in the Senate, I think, is McCarthy's map on his wall, right? And Senator Smith's fireplace.
Well, and then you transition to like the Fire Island episode, which is so iconic for so many people, but also very specific of that particular time period. And is that when you see like, oh my God, we're going to do like the late 70s in Fire Island. Oh boy.
Oh, that was fun. That was fun. We shot that early on. We shot that in block 2. There were 4 blocks. We shot that in block 2 because they needed to be outside. They needed to be in the water. And it was going to be fall soon. So we needed the sun and the warmth, the heat that was left in Toronto. And we talked about doing that in different ways. That was part of my interview discussion when I first interviewed for the job, is where are we going to shoot this? You know, we have a beach in Ontario that has dunes. We talked about that. Then we scouted a lot of beaches that were like 2 hours away, but the architecture was very specific, and Ontario architecture, like cottage architecture, does not look like that. I mean, Fire Island's pretty specific. So then we wound up, I was like, okay, why don't we build the exterior on the beach? Ronald, the cinematographer for that episode, and I were like, found this spot that I was like, this would work great. We can shoot the exterior here and set it back into like, you know, some forested area or some treed area, and then turn it around, take it into studio for the house. But we were running out of time, and our carpenters were running out of steam because we built a lot. Everybody was running out of steam, and all of a sudden, Phil, our location manager for that block, showed me this house, and I was like, this is perfect. Because there was another house that I can't remember who was lobbying for, but I'm like, it's so wrong. It was too new. It was so wrong. And when I saw this one, I was like, this is contained. It's actually smaller than it looks, but it had so many vantage points for a camera. It wasn't as originally imagined, like right on the beach, but that was a difficult ask. And we could have done it again with that exterior build and interior build, but this gave us so much. And I had taken a shot when we were on the beach, scouting one of our beaches. And we were in the front yard with Ronald, and Ronald was like, why don't we do, and I'm like, blue screen there, some grasses here. And he's like, pull up that picture. And I'm like, this picture. And he's like, so we funneled the eye that way with some blue screen. And I'm like, and it works perfect. And now we can be in the house looking out and you see water. So that house was that was a great find, and so damn fun.
Well, and you know, just hearing you talk, you know, I think there's a lot of misconception about what production designers do in terms of like, no, we don't just put furniture on a set and say go.
I don't even put furniture on a set. It's not my job. It's my set decorator's job.
Yeah, but what I try to explain to people is that you are thinking about not just how it looks, but how logistically it can all be shot in a way that works for everybody. Do you find that is that something that you just learned over the course of your career, how to think that way, or has that always been kind of like the way you think?
I mean, I've always had an affinity for design and for art, so that part comes easy, and it's a tough one because when I talk to students, I'm like, you either have that or you don't. You build on that, but if you don't have that, it's just harder to build on it, right? So I can see space. Like when I close my eyes, I can move through a set so that then I'm like, when I'm designing one from scratch, for example, when I'm moving through it in my mind's eye, I can then just take a pencil and start drawing at a 1/4 inch scale to start the process. And so it's not done by, you know, what I want it to look like necessarily. It's got to work for the action. It's got to work for the action. And I have to be able to pitch it with some action in mind, because that's how it first starts. Like I go to a director and I'm like, is this what you were thinking? Because I can, like, what do you think of this? And they'll be like, oh, okay, actually I was thinking this as well. How about we move this around? So it's always about how does this work for the action? Because sometimes you'll be on a set and it doesn't work for reality. But I'm not building a set for reality. I'm not building a set for you to live in. I'm building a set for the actors and for the camera work and for the direction. So yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. It's envisioning and bringing that vision to life. I know some people think that I'm sitting there drawing all day, and I wish I was drawing all day, but that's not what I'm doing all day.
Well, but it also has to be, you just said, I'm not building for real life. And yet at the same time, you have to walk this balance between these places still have to feel real for the audience. How do you thread that needle?
They also have to look real. The feeling real and the looking real, it all comes with, again, the scenic work, the set dressing, the painting, the nuances of a build. the selections of wallpapers and how those are put on, right? You can't just, we don't just paint a room and call it done. Even if it's just paint a room, you still have to age it. You still have to add the stories that make it feel like a room. Like even a bathroom, there's got to be dirt. Like we built the bathroom. That was a build, interior, exterior at the park. I don't know exactly where they're going to, point the camera. So we had some skylights so that some light could get in. We were up top there putting like crushed leaves in the windowsills as well. So so you catch it, like debris in the place, because when the door opens, stuff's gonna come flying in, right? It's all that stuff. It's the lived in stuff. It's the layering of that then makes it feel real.
Ron Nicewander, this is clearly a passion project for him. And so I'm just curious, why was he the right person for this particular project?
Oh my God, for so many reasons. His writing is phenomenal. His ability to like infuse emotion into pretty much everything, including every conversation. His words brought the characters to life even before the words were even spoken. So he was also really great in terms of, he said to me, don't read the book, because I was going to read the book, and he's like, don't do it. And I was like, okay, because I know that could mess me up. I don't want stuff in there that he doesn't want to be in there for me, right? But when I would say like, I'm missing some stuff here, because there were a lot of sets. Not every story that's in a set can be in the script. There's just too much. So then we'd sit and go, I'd be like, okay, how do you want, what do you want in Tim's apartment, for example? How about we do this? How about we do this? He's like, oh, and I want let's find a mascot, or let's find something from his university days, or let me tell you the story that happened to me. For example, for understanding Hawk, right? Because he and I differed on what we thought Hawk was. Again, because of our own personal experiences, right? So I remember we're sitting on a location scout, and we're at a restaurant for our lunch, and Ron and I are sitting separately. And like within 10 minutes, Ron and I are crying at the table, because he's conveying a personal story that relates to Hawk, that is helping me understand Hawk a little bit better, or not even a little bit better, but from his framework and what he wants him to be, right? Because I think when I'm working, I'm always trying to bring something of myself. I think we all creatives do that, so that we can have some sort of way to empathize with the character. And that's the way to bring them to life, is to try to find some commonality. And so Ron was really great at helping me see commonality. I'm not a gay man, so there were nuances that I would have missed. And Ron was like fantastic at bringing me closer to the character.
And then taking from that to Dan Minahan, who directed, who's just a fantastic director. What did he bring to
He's
this?
got fantastic stories, and he also has fantastic visual taste and style, which is so incredibly helpful to me, because I have to then defend my choices less, right? Because we're on the same wavelength style-wise and aesthetic-wise, and less words have to be spoken, right? Like whenever I'm speaking with an artist, we don't talk that, like there's less talking. There's a lot of oh yeah, oh that's Dan. So there was more. He's got such great taste, and can also convey so well what he wants, what he wants a scene to look like, and makes decisions really quick, which is always helpful to a production designer.
Well, I could talk about every single episode of this series, because it's just a stunning achievement on so many different levels. Anastasia, congratulations. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the upcoming award season, and stay tuned for interviews with more contenders. Anastasia Masaro, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.